Well, yesterday, the former Prime Minister, Sir John Major, launched a blistering attack on the current Prime Minister over the Owen Paterson affair in Parliament, which we were discussing earlier, calling the administration politically corrupt. But he then went on and returned to his favourite subject, Europe. He said that, and I quote, invoking Article 16 would be colossally stupid, and he said it would be absurd. And it led me to think that perhaps there was a coordinated attack in relation to the use of Article 16, because the Irish Prime Minister on Thursday told us that it would be irresponsible and unwise for the United Kingdom government to invoke Article 16. Then on Friday, we had the Vice President of the European Commission, Maros Sefcovic, telling us that there would be serious consequences if Article 16 was invoked by the UK government. And it did make me wonder who was coming next to tell us about Article 16 and the dire consequences. Of course, Article 16 is part of the protocol and was there to be used if necessary. And it makes you wonder why it was put in to the protocol at all, if it wasn't to be used. Of course, Sir John Major has come out on many occasions to talk about Northern Ireland and Europe, but he has yet to come out and talk about the fact that British citizens living here in Northern Ireland are subject to a different regime than the rest of the United Kingdom. He doesn't speak about that, but he does speak in favour of the European Union. Nigel, I'm sure you have some views on his intervention, which came yesterday as well, about Northern Ireland, and indeed his outburst in relation to the current Prime Minister and how he handled the Owen Paterson affair.
It's strange, Arlene, because he did for a few years, it seemed to me, to have sort of stopped being Prime Minister and gone back to normal life. And I sort of thought, well, this looks like a former Prime Minister who's, happy in his own skin and quite well balanced. And I think that was the case until the Brexit referendum came along. And the truth of it is that Major is a fanatical Europhile. He was, of course, the man that pushed through the Maastricht Treaty without a referendum in this country. And now he begins to look bitter, twisted, and clearly one of his main motivations against Boris Johnson is that Boris decided in the end to opt for the Brexit side of the debate, and John Major never, ever wants him to forget it. And I think it's reasonable that former Prime Ministers from time to time should speak out on issues about which they feel very strongly. But it seems with John Major, this is now becoming a regular habit. And I think with it, his own reputation and credibility start to decline. He's not quite yet in Ted Heath territory, which was the longest sulk in history. He couldn't bear Margaret Thatcher. But I do think John Major's in trouble. And as I say, starting to look somewhat bitter.
Well, yes, and Paul, this isn't the only story that's about, i.e. the protocol today. We've heard in the Sunday Telegraph today around the fact that the UK government is looking at drawing up plans for their own scientific programmes because the European Union have delayed their entry into Horizon 2020 and other scientific programmes, I think, and satellite programmes. We had actually opted into those programmes after Brexit, I think at a cost of £15 billion over 7 years. Overall, it's a £77 billion programme over those 7 years. But because the EU have delayed, and they're using it actually to get leverage in the Northern Ireland Protocol discussions, we're actually not going to be able to enter those schemes, which are very important actually for collaboration and for the science industry. I mean, we are getting the attention because we're drawing up new plans, but really this is Europe delaying our entry into these plans.
Yeah, and they're clearly using it as a bargaining chip. I think there's a certain amount of posturing going on. They're bringing in these scientific programmes as a way to try to win concessions from the UK on the protocol, and no doubt on other areas as well. I think both sides probably on this would stand to lose too much, so I think the EU is ramping it up, but whether they would go through with it in the final analysis, I doubt. But I think in terms of the protocol, it clearly isn't working. It needs to be looked at. Article 16 was there for a reason, and it said that where either side is experiencing societal or economic challenges, they're entitled to invoke it. And I think that is pretty clearly the case in Northern Ireland at the moment. So I don't think it would be unreasonable. It certainly isn't unreasonable to talk about invoking Article 16, though of course it should be a last resort, and we should try to negotiate a suitable outcome if we can, which I think we will probably do. I think these things always go through the same routine, don't they? There's a lot of strong talk, there's a lot of hardball, there's a lot of eyeballing, as we saw with reaching a deal on the EU when we left in the first place. But in the end, I suspect both sides will realise that there's a deal to be struck there. I mean, it's the EU, I think, is clearly being zealous in terms of the border. I read the other day that 20% of all checks being carried out by the EU are on goods coming into Northern Ireland, which to me seems entirely disproportionate. And actually, if you look at the EU's eastern frontier, the checks coming in on goods on Northern Ireland outstrip in terms of numbers the checks that are taking place on the EU's eastern frontier. So I think on this, the government, the UK, has got a point, but I do think ultimately that both sides will realise it's not in their interest to have the UK pulling out of these programmes and there to be no agreement going forward.
I'm going to take issue with both of you on this. I didn't campaign for Brexit for us to stay part of multi-billion EU programmes where, given my knowledge of how Brussels spends money, I'm absolutely certain we're not getting good value for money or bang for buck. Now, I know there are those in our universities who, of course, get some of this money and will scream blue murder at what I'm saying. We don't need Brussels to do science. You know, we can do science, we can cooperate with people all over the world to do science. We don't need to do it through EU programmes that will go on costing this country billions of pounds every year. So as far as I'm concerned, the sooner we're out of these things, the better. Brexit was... I was horrified when Mrs May came back and said we're going to stay in these programmes, and I was even more surprised when Boris's oven-ready deal, as he called it, continued to keep us stuck here. If we're going to spend billions of British taxpayers' money on scientific programmes and cooperation, good, let's not do it through Brussels organisations.
But cooperating with...
Yeah, and I suppose...
is not a bad thing.
Yeah, Brussels will...
Cooperating with Europe is a good thing. Cooperating with European universities may be a good thing, but we don't need...
There will be joint interests sometimes.
But we don't need EU programmes. That's really the point that I'm making.
Sorry, Arlene.
Well, I think if we don't have the engagement with Horizon 2020, and you're right, the universities really do, and I think that's why we opted into those programmes, Nigel. But I think you're right around the fact that we have shown through COVID, I think, the brilliance of scientific advances in the UK, and the fact was the NHRA and organisations like that were able to stand on their own 2 feet and actually go ahead of Europe in terms of being freed from bureaucracy. But I do think it tells you something that the EU is prepared to use Horizon 2020, their flagship scientific programme, to try and stop any deal on the Northern Ireland Protocol. I think that tells you all you need to know about where their priorities are. And it is really terrible. I mean, they are interfering in the sovereignty of the United Kingdom, and not just people in Northern Ireland, but people right across the UK should be very, very concerned about that. Paul's right about the number of checks that are happening. And actually, it is completely disproportionate, and it isn't looking at the risk. I mean, what is the risk to the single market of goods coming across from GB into Northern Ireland to be sold in Northern Ireland? There is no risk. And the reality is this is about control, and the European Union are determined to keep that control over Northern Ireland because the Irish government have wanted for some time to have that there. And really, it needs to be sorted out. I take Paul's point about he hopes there will be a negotiated settlement. We all hope for that. But it's been going on all year, and it needs to come to an end at some stage. And I think David Frost has indicated that it's going to come to an end in November, and I very much welcome that to be the case.
Yeah, well, let's see, Arlene. I have to say, I do like David Frost. He stands up and says all the right things. But ultimately, what to do about Northern Ireland is going to be a big call for Boris Johnson at some point before too long. It really is.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.